Hey, how's it going? My name is Mike, and if you are a subscriber to my channel, you will notice that I've renamed the channel to Precision Mike, a name I use on some of the forums. And the channel is still going to mainly be about car Misa. That is always going to be my main focus and passion, but I also have a couple of other cars that I wanted to share with you guys on the channel. I think there might be kind of some interest here as well. If you're not familiar with car Misa, that is a 94 BMW that I am rebuilding, and it's got an incredible audio system going into it. It's kind of a rebuild of that. So if you're new to the channel, check that out. It's some really cool stuff going on there. So what this is an introduction video. Kind of the purpose of this video is to introduce you to this car. This is a 2003 Mercedes C32 AMG. And this used to be my daily, and well, now we'll call it my weekly because I work from home and don't drive a whole lot. So in this video, we're gonna go through and kind of do a tour of the car and give you an idea of what I've done and some ideas of things that I'd like to do to it. So stay tuned. All right, if you're not familiar with a C32 AMG, this is the W203 chassis. This car is quite rare. They made, I don't know, somebody maybe correct me in the comments, a total of 6,000 over 3 years, and about half of those, about 3,000, were brought into the US. So pretty rare car in the US. Kind of looks like a typical C-Class, but it's got a lot more power and it's a lot funner to drive. So it is a 3.2 liter V6 with a twin screw supercharger. Stock, the car makes 349 horsepower. This one is not stock, and in just a little bit here, we'll go over the mods. It is basically the little brother to the E55, a car which I also own. In the future on this channel, I will be getting into this car as well. This thing's kind of asleep right now, a little bit apart, but we'll be going over that car as well. All right, let's get into the C32. All right, so this car, if you're not familiar, I live in Arizona, and this car's been in Arizona its whole life. No accidents. And in terms of the owners, there's just I'll give you a brief kind of a backstory there. It's a pretty cool story. I initially bought this car 10 and a half years ago. It didn't look like this. It had some mods on it, had some different wheels, and I just didn't really like it. So I ended up doing almost everything you see here, except for the green parts, which I'll talk about in a minute. I then sold the car to a coworker, probably, I don't know, a couple of years later, 2-3 years later. Then I missed the car, so I bought it back from him. Then I did everything that you see that we're gonna go through on this video. Then I bought the BMW, and I had the E55, and I didn't really want 3 project cars, so I ended up getting rid of this and I sold it. I missed it once again, and that was about 3.5 years ago. And about, I don't know, 8 months or so ago, I reached out to the person I sold it to. Turns out it was his wife that I was texting, and unfortunately, he had passed away. His name was Tim, super nice guy, rest in peace, Tim. I ended up working out a deal with his wife. He ended up buying a collection, he had a collection of cars, about 50 cars, and I ended up buying this back. So when I originally purchased the car, it had 53,000 miles on it. Right now it's sitting at 141,000 miles on it, and it was the first Mercedes I ever bought. We've got a bunch in the family, and I've had several Mercedes, and I really like these cars. I think they're awesome, and the whole family loves them. So, all right, let's go on from here. All right, the first thing I want to highlight is the wheels and the stance. So the wheels, first off, they are reps. Don't hate, they do have a BBS center cap. They are just as round and actually have proven to be pretty well, done pretty well. The car has got, I've put about 80,000 miles on these wheels, knock on wood, with 0 issues. No bends, no cracks, no nothing. I do live in Arizona again, and it's like driving on a pool table. It's pretty flat, pretty good roads out here. I had the lips polished. Normally these are not polished on these wheels, and I had those polished, had them, and again, I've had these wheels for, gosh, 7 or 8 years now, and I had the barrels painted and the lips polished. So looking at them, I have never had somebody come up to me and say, hey man, those are reps. They really do look like the authentic BBS. In terms of their size, I'm running a 19 by 9.5 in the rears, and then a 19 by 8.5 up front. The offset is the rears are an ET40 and the fronts are an ET30. And I'm also running spacers as well, which we'll talk about in a moment. In terms of the tires, I run, they're called Otsu, I believe is how you pronounce it. That's the name right there. They're an SP8000. I run a 235, 35, 19 in the front, 265, 30, 19 in the rear. And they're basically, as I understand it, they're made by Falcon. So they have this crazy name, but they're effectively a Falcon tire. They're really good tires, man. They're cheap, they're pretty soft, not super soft, pretty grippy, quiet, good tire life, and they're cheap. So I love these tires. I run these on some other cars too. Normally, these wheels, which are made by, they're made by STR Racing is the name of the company who makes these. These are the STR 601. I'm not even sure these are still available. But these normally will not fit on these cars. With the offset, you just can't fit them. And I was bound and determined. So I bought a spare caliper, and I hired a mechanical engineer who went through and we cut the caliper in half down the middle like this. And I said I need to be able to remove about, it was just over a 1/16 off the face of the caliper in order to be able to fit the wheels on here. And he went through and did a bunch of structural testing with some different devices to be able to check, the brake tensile of the calipers, and said if you remove a 1/16 or so, there's literally no difference at all. The caliper where I shaved, so I did shave the face of the metal, it's about an inch thick. So it's, again, what I've removed is like nothing. From there, I was able to fit these wheels. So, all right, let's talk next about the suspension and the stance. All right, let me get back out here so you can see the way the car sits. In terms of suspension and stance and everything I've done there, it's got H&R sport coils, which the original owner that I bought the car from had those cut. He cut half a coil out. Apparently he had a buddy who is a race car driver and did all his own work on his car, and he apparently was able to cut these quote unquote properly. I've never had any issues with the car with them being cut, and again, I've put 80,000 miles on it with no problems. It has got Bilstein shocks and struts, the yellow ones, and the car rides, even though it's slammed, it's definitely tucked in the rear. It sits level too. If you notice, the rear of these cars, the fender well is not perfectly round. It basically sits a little, it looks lower in the rear than it is, but the car is sitting level. That was important to me. The car actually rides surprisingly well. Again, it's a little bit unfair with me living in Arizona, but it rides really nice, okay? In terms of fitting, again, the tires, the wheels, and everything, I ended up having to do, I did 10 millimeter spacers, hub centric, in all four corners, and I also rolled and pulled the fenders. If you notice, we're at dusk here, you can see the fender roll and pull was done very, very well. I did it all myself, and there's no damage. I did it properly with I heated the fender up, used a infrared thermometer, used a proper roller. It just really, really took my time. I pulled the fenders, front and rear, about a ½ inch to be able to get this setup, the wheel setup on it that I wanted. I'm not into tons of negative camber. The car has got factory spec for the alignment, and the tires wear perfectly. But again, I wanted a really nice tight fit. I wanted a really nice stance. If you were to take your pinky, you can just fit your pinky between the tire and the fender. Even right here, I can't, that's it. But there is no rubbing. So, excuse me, that's the look I wanted. I like a real tight, proper stance like this, but again, I didn't want to deal with bad alignment or, rubbing or issues like that. In the rear of the car, there are camber correction arms on the bottom arms, and then there are, I believe they're called crash bolts up front. Again, that allows for a proper alignment, and there's 4 of those. I think you can do 2, but there are 2 per side, which allows for proper alignment. Also, in terms of the rear spring perch pads. There are pads in these for anybody who really knows these cars, and there are 3 different variables that you can get, and they're indicated by the number of dots that are on the pads. Mine are the lowest of the 3 pads. All right, so all right, from there let's talk about the next part of the car, which will be the paint and the body. All right, as you can likely see, the paint shows quite well on the car. I had, right before I sold it to Tim, I had a bunch of paint work done. I had the hood resprayed, the bottoms of the doors, the rear bumper, all the way around. And the rear doors, if you're familiar with these cars, had some rust issues. The bottoms of the doors, that's all been taken care of. But the paint overall looks pretty good. The hood definitely needs to be wet sanded. My buddy, I got a buddy who did the paint work at his shop, and they were in a hurry and they didn't have time to cut and buff the hood. So I still haven't done that, but I will do that. I am going to do a full paint correction on the car, and that will be something that I will take video of, and I will post that, kind of the process that I do. Again, I'm just consider myself to be a decent, shade tree, Harbor Freight kind of guy, just like a lot of people watching this probably. I don't have a shop. I don't have crazy tools. I just really take my time and try to do stuff right. That's kind of, as my name indicates on the channel, right? Precision Mike. So, all right, from here, let's talk about the next part of the car. All right, next we'll talk about the outside accents on the car and kind of what I've done there. Not a ton, just kind of subtle things. So I did this 3.2 AMG badge, kind of paying homage to the 6.3 for the E63. Something different. Normally it's got the V6 compressor badge. I did, obviously, you may have seen it by now, painted the front brakes. Again, did those Patronus green to match kind of the theme for the F1 fan that I am. Did clear front marker lights, amber bulbs in those. And then this is pretty cool, and I can't take credit for this. The previous owner did this, which was really slick. Car's got a just a normal trunk lip, like a lot of cars do, but it's carbon fiber. And what he did, and I've had it redone since, is he taped it off and painted just the top part. So if you're looking at it from here, it's kind of subtle and it kind of blends in. But if you go over here, obviously you can see the exposed carbon. So I think that's a really cool kind of a detail, and you can see the bottom part there as well. I hate, personally, no disrespect to anybody that's got this, but the only cars that I like carbon fiber on are black cars. I just think that it looks like something that got thrown on the car. But this, because of where the body meets the piece, I think it really looks cool. So again, pretty subtle there. Stock exhaust there. I did do a resonator delete, so that obviously, I don't know if it does anything for power. Also 20% window tint all the way around, which I think is legal here in Arizona, which is nice. So and then I did LED plate lights, AMG frame. Again, just little subtle touches. Otherwise, other than that, the outside of the car is stock. All right, let's move on to the next section. All right, next we'll go into the interior, which is stock. Nothing's been done here, just try to maintain it as well as I could. The car has some cool stuff for a C-Class. You can see it's got leather pleated door panels and this kind of a cool silver trim. And aside from that, like I say, the interior, I really haven't done anything with in terms of customizing it or modding it or anything like that. The leather is in, I'd say, very good condition. You can see the driver's bolster. I gotta re-dye that a little bit. And it's tough to see in the video, but the bottom of the driver's seat occasionally will be kind of wrinkled, so doesn't look the best. So I may add new foam, replace the bottom of the foam. One thing I will be doing for the channel is a process called Leatherique. Not sure if you guys have heard of that brand, but it's a really good leather rejuvenator is basically what it's called. So it's kind of a 3-step process, and I will be taking video of that. I'll be doing that on the BMW as well, obviously extensively, but that's the interior pretty much. Again, nothing crazy going on there. All right, so we talked about the brakes being painted Petronas green, as you can see once again, and I tied in the engine bay as well. So when I did this initially several years ago, it was back when the F1 team used a lot of silver base and then like a green fade. So I was going for the same theme, and that's exactly what I did. So I went to the extent of buying this keychain, which is kind of beat up, because I wanted to get the exact color of the Petronas green. You can't buy the paint, you know, you can't go to a paint shop and say, hey, I need, you know, AMG green. They won't, there is no code that they'll supply. So I went to the extent of buying multiple colors and then custom blending the paint myself to get as good a match as I could. And it matches very well. Then I went ahead and painted the air boxes, the engine cover, the supercharger, and obviously the green parts here. The fade I did as well. And all of this stuff, guys, in terms of paint, this was literally my first attempt at painting. I had never painted before in my life, and I just took my time, really prepped it really good. I think that's probably one of the most important things when it comes to paint. It's 95% prep and 5% application. And I did this in my driveway. I'm out here, you know, in my driveway, and I did this with Harbor Freight tools. The paint gun I used was $29 and the airbrush was $19. I used the airbrush to do the fade. So anybody can do it. If I can do it, it's not that hard. So in terms of the engine as well, so this is again, it's a 3.2 liter V6 with a twin screw blower. And what's cool about the AMGs, especially from this era, is you can see that person, that signature right there, is the builder of this motor. So I don't know that they still do this, but what they did in this era is they would take the block and roll it into their workstation, and one person, they called it one man, one engine, would hand assemble the entire motor, and then they would install it in the car. So that plaque I just showed is the signature of the person who did the build of the motor. You can even go to their website and you can find, you know, like a bio on that person, see if they still work there. I doubt it because the car's 20 years old, but it's pretty cool to be able to do that. So also with regard to the painting of this stuff, it probably looks pretty good coming through on the video, but what I did is this piece right here, especially the airbox and the engine cover, were textured from the factory. So I wanted to maintain that texture, and that's what I did. And just a moment, let me pause this and I'll show you the engine cover I did for the E55, which I sanded smooth and then painted that. Let me grab that real quick for you. All right, as I mentioned, the E55 is kind of apart right now and just kind of put off to the side. But this is the engine cover I did for that car. That car's got, again, a V8 with a supercharger. So it's just the big brother of the C32. But I think with it, if you notice, I sanded this down smooth and did the same fade, and then the surge tanks are painted green and everything. And I think that looks a lot nicer than what I did for the C32. So the C32 I will be redoing, and I will capture all of that and post a video when I do that. All right, let's go on to the next part. All right, next thing I want to talk about are the engine mods for the car. So it's got a, underneath the engine cover, there is, again, there's the pulley and everything for the supercharger. That is smaller, which makes the blower spin faster, and that's a 65 millimeter, which gives the car quite a bit more power. And then there is a Eurocharge ECU tune and a TCU tune. And then, if you didn't notice it by now, custom air boxes. And for those of you who are familiar with these cars, take a good look at this and think about what doesn't look the same. Maybe by now you've seen it. So here's what I wanted. I don't know what the proper terminology is for it, but the air intake at the back of the motor here on the actual intake, the throttle body, is really restrictive on these cars. If you notice, if you're familiar and you look at this, this is off of an E55. It's off of what's called the M113K, the larger V8 motor. So what a lot of guys do is take that snout, this piece of rubber, and then they use the E55 air boxes, which hang down up to about here. They don't really snap in properly. They don't fit very well, and then the engine cover definitely doesn't fit. So what I did is I took the factory C32 airbox and I cut it right here. Then I took an E55 airbox and I cut it right here. And I took the hose in this part from the E55 and I molded it. I attached the two and then molded it and did all the body work here. And I did that on both sides. And if you look at it, you really can't tell. My objective was to be able to have the benefit of more airflow into the motor, but have it look like this. All right, so that's kind of, I think, pretty cool. I don't think I've ever seen anybody do that, and I think it looks really sharp. In terms of power, the car stock makes 349 crank horsepower, and it's probably, I don't know, I've never had it dynoed. Please don't bite my head off in the comments, but low 400s, 410 maybe, something like that, with the mods that it's got. So it scoots. The car weighs 3,400 pounds. It's a completely different drive again than the E55, but it gets out, man. It's really quick. Stoplight to stoplight, it's a real snappy car compared to the low, kind of that low-end torque grunt of the E55. So very different driving experience, but both great cars. All right, let's move on to the next part. All right, so that will wrap up this video. Couple of other final things here. Again, there's gonna be some maintenance I'm gonna be doing on the car, even things like an oil change, things like that. I have watched videos of, hey, how to do an oil change on a given car. And there's some really good ones out there, don't get me wrong, but even that as an example, I've never seen one that explains everything the way I would want to see it. So, what size sockets to use, what are the torque specs, all kinds of stuff like that. Again, there's some really good ones, but especially for these cars, not a lot of content. So I will be doing that. And things like the paint correction, even my wash process. I do a 2-bucket, minimum touching of the car, kind of a hand wash process. I'm also going to be doing paddle shifters on this car, which is not a stock option and quite rare, especially because if you do have one of these cars and you've done paddle shifters, you may say, well, it's not that bad to do. There's a gentleman by the name of Chris who sells a kit that you can do paddle shifters on these cars. Unfortunately, and I think he sold about 10 of those kits so far, so I don't think there's a lot of cars that have them. My car is one that has, it's one of the last runs of an 03, and the VIN, based on the VIN, it basically has a different clock spring, and so I have to do a wireless transmitter inside the steering wheel for the paddles. But I am dead set on getting paddles in the car. So I'll be doing that, and I'll be shooting video of all of that. Finally, if you live in the Phoenix area or ever stopping by and you want to stop by the house and check out the cars, again, I got the E55, the C32, and most important to me, hands down, is going to be the BMW with the audio system. So, all right, that should be it. Thank you very much for watching. If you have not yet already, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.